Nintendo beat the terminal 3D Zelda tutorial allegations plaguing the Legend of Zelda series with Breath of the Wild, so there's a lot of pressure leading up to Tears of the Kingdom. How do you begin the sequel to one of the most iconic modern games of all time? There was only one way to go but up, but in order to do that, they needed to go down first. Here's why this works so well. Gamers. With about 90% of the promo for Tears of the Kingdom showcasing the sky, its miscellaneous islands, and brief looks into Hyrule, beginning underneath the kingdom itself is not only contradictory to the expectation it set, but sets itself apart from its predecessor immediately. I know there was pretty heavy speculation that this would be the case, myself included, but it was a fun reminder that when Breath of the Wild's sequel was first announced in 2019, the first clips we got were Link and Zelda traversing a very similar cave-like terrain underground. Tears of the Kingdom begins very differently from any other Zelda game. Link and Zelda together. The closest thing we've seen in the Zelda series to this is the beginning of Link to the Past. After quickly moving through the first dungeon, you can rescue Zelda from the cellars. She follows directly behind you, not offering any assistance, and is promptly dropped off in the sanctuary afterward. This makes Zelda's appearance in Tears of the Kingdom in the first 10 seconds so special, because it positions her as intrinsic to the storyline rather than just an accessory. But it also makes you wonder, hey, where is all that Hyrule we just saved in Breath of the Wild? I would actually argue that Breath of the Wild doesn't have much of a prologue at all. It's pretty much strictly tutorial. Because the concept of an open world Zelda game was brand new, pretty much everything was tutorial. The Shrine of Resurrection itself was built to protect Link. It creates a safe atmosphere that promises hope and a distinct purpose upon waking for our protagonist. That even though Link has no drip, no defense, no bitches, and a red bokoblin can one-shot him with a tree branch, that there's something special about this guy and his mission. The world is his to rediscover if only he dares try. Tears of the Kingdom presents something else entirely. Something ominous. And I want to quickly make the distinction between prologue and tutorial. I will not be getting into the Great Sky Island today because as beautiful as it is, what really sets Tears of the Kingdom apart is its 20-minute prologue. The excitement of being with Zelda side by side, not in a boss fight, is quickly dampened by electronic choral pulses, low bells, and cave sounds. You're thrown into the gloom investigation without being briefed by the game because the game understands that you are the established champion of Hyrule and Zelda's most trusted companion, and you have the Master Sword, full hearts, and full stamina to prove it. Most people playing Tears of the Kingdom come from an existing player base of Zelda fans having beaten Breath of the Wild and come into the sequel having experienced the full potential of Link's capabilities as outlined in the first game. Rather than giving us cutscenes on cutscenes about life in post Breath of the Wild Hyrule and cluing us in on exposition, it unravels around us as we begin to descend deeper and deeper beneath Hyrule Castle. And one of the first bits of information that's unraveled is about the Zonai. This was gag-worthy, because the Zonai were never mentioned in Breath of the Wild apart from the ruins in the Llanowar region. The Zonai's involvement was the most heavily speculated fan theory for years, so to see the Zonai architecture up close and personal right off the bat is not only cluing us in on this new narrative, but it's a really special moment for Zelda freaks who spent years watching video essays and reading Creating a Champion. I think Zelda revealing the origin of these sculptures is also important because she is innately linked to this civilization, more specifically Rauru and Sonia. It's a great little foreshadow sprinkle of Zelda's involvement in the game with the Zonai specifically. I spent a lot of time in this area, just letting Zelda lead and studying every crevice I could until the Master Sword starts glowing. Immediately the stakes are raised, and even though you can see it coming a mile away because of the scary sound effects and Zelda specifically telling you, "Oh, I'll always be safe with you, Link," ensuring her total unsafety, you are beginning the game with the most amount of power that Link could possibly hold. And then after Zelda so brazenly asks us if we're okay after beating back 3 literal bats, we see the full murals that we got a glimpse of in the 2022 teaser, and we learn that they detail the imprisoning war. Rather than have Zelda just talk at us from a position of omniscience, we watch her puzzle it together in real time. And while this is happening, never mind what you might be thinking if you've played Skyward Sword, we also get the introduction of the Purapad, differentiating itself from the iconic Sheikah Slate from Breath of the Wild, signaling to us that enough time has passed for new technologies to emerge. And the Sheikah influence is sidestepping to make way for the radical Zonai overhaul that this game gets. The fact that the 3 pictures taken by Zelda of these murals is the only thing on the Purapad when we get it later is almost haunting. It is a constant reminder of your objective and potentially the history you're doomed to repeat or at least contend with. It also allows you to see the surroundings from Zelda's eyes in that very moment. You have free reign again in this room once the cutscene is over, so you can study the murals up close and desperately try to search for anything to blow up these frustratingly obvious bombable rocks. While some could find this format restrictive, being forced into these tunnels, never straying too far from Zelda, I think the paradox of having Link at full power, only there to support Zelda's research endeavors, is not only interesting, but it also makes the cutscenes touching. And being able to freely explore this specific area, knowing that you as Link have very recently saved all of Hyrule canonically, gives the player a heightened sense of security and confidence. The only things you actually fight down here are keys, but the game forces self-restraint, which makes our next encounter procure all that more of a payoff. And as you delve deeper, the music steadily growing louder and more intense, until it culminates in a cacophonous mix of high-pitched short piano pings, swirling choral hums, and your footsteps echoing in the narrow, cracked stairways. With every turn of the corner, you're expecting an enemy to jump out as the gloom grows thicker, but you're just met with more sound cues, slowing you down to take in the final room you find yourself in. And you know what's coming, but the suspense leading up to this moment is immense, both in-game and on the larger scale of this sequel coming out 6 years after Breath of the Wild. You hear the beginning notes of Ganon's theme as you approach his decrepit tableau, and within seconds of the suspended Zonai hand holding him in place, malice erupts from his body and corrodes the Master Sword, sapping Link almost entirely of his life force. The overwhelming sense of power and control you had is instantly lost, and all of a sudden, protecting Zelda doesn't seem possible. The game setting you up with all that power, only to lose it a few minutes later to Ganon in a state which can only be described as crusty, is devastating. Furthermore, the Master Sword begins to feel like a wooden stick when we're told time after time that it's the sword of legend and nothing can move against it. And here we have the mere dusty carcass of Ganondorf, impairing Link to the point of brandishing him with a sharp tick of his head. In a moment where you already feel so defeated, to be getting cooked by Ganondorf this severely is lethal. We get the Rauru name drop here for the first time, which will mean something to people who have played Ocarina of Time, as Rauru was the name of one of the 7 sages there, and the more observant Breath of the Wild players who might have explored Rauru Hillside. You're taken out of the moment for a second, because if either of those things came to mind, you're wondering how those pieces fit into this puzzle. But if neither of those came to mind, then you're kind of just wondering who the hell that is. And before you can think too hard about it, Hyrule Castle begins to lift into the air and everything begins to crumble around you. I think one of Breath of the Wild's biggest problems for me was that the stakes really never felt that high. We didn't watch the calamity come to fruition in real time. We weren't on the ground with anyone when Calamity Ganon created a barrier around the castle. Here we are, watching a kingdom that just recently began to rebuild itself after one tragedy, crumbling and fragmenting in front of our face. And we're helpless as we watch the woman we love disappear into a seemingly bottomless pit. But I actually believe the last shot in this sequence is the most important. The citizens of Hyrule that you have come to know from Breath of the Wild are watching this unexplainable catastrophe happen in the midst of rebuilding their community. Everyone looks on in panic and disbelief while the tools and resources they've accumulated to restore Hyrule wait to the left as bits of sky rain down around them. The decision to include this shot intrinsically ties the citizens of Hyrule to Link and Zelda's story. The world immediately immediately feels lived in. The stakes are clear because we are shown real community members' live reactions to yet another supernatural tragedy befalling them. With this, Tears of the Kingdom immediately pauses itself as a game that goes beyond our typical two protagonists. And when Link wakes in this new place with his new arm, you're left with the knowledge that Hyrule has been through yet another major once-in-a-lifetime event. Zelda is missing, Ganondorf is back, the Master Sword is broken and decayed, your body has been forever changed, and you have no idea where you found yourself now. Being able to control Link again in this moment feels very different from earlier, and different from the way we moved in Breath of the Wild. It doesn't really feel hopeful, it feels time-sensitive. The next room is very reminiscent of the Zonai architecture we saw in the earlier part of this prologue, but also of Temples of Time in other Zelda games. Pair that with the glowing blue travel gate you can activate, and you have this overwhelming mix of unfamiliar and familiar. Once again, you can run around this area to your heart's content and dive off increasingly higher solid stone springboards into the water below in the corridors ahead. Not only is this just fun and something we know from Breath of the Wild, but it also very sneakily prepares you for the massive dive you're about to take into the world. And when you dive into the biggest pool of water that leads to our first glimpse of the outside world this entire time, you hear it first. Birds chirping. Breath of the Wild was excellent at sound cues and telling a story by way of auditory effects. Tears of the Kingdom turns this up to 11 by telling you where you are without saying it in words. This gives way to a flock outside just waiting for you to take in the scene before you. Eldin erupting with gloom, the labyrinth suspended in air, floating disjointed islands that feel impossible to navigate in your current form. But all the suspense and anxiety the prologue has caused you melts away in this moment as you realize just how massive this world you thought you knew has become. While Tears of the Kingdom isn't a strict inverted narrative, Link having to traverse the beginning where he once was at the peak of his power, now harnessing power granted to him by the very civilization that cultivated these grounds, really drives the Ouroboros theming. This is not something we can appreciate 20 minutes into the game, obviously, but the game's end is right in front of our face. This prologue strategically withholds information from you because it makes Link's journey all the way back here at the end of the game all the more gratifying. Essentially, your introduction to the game acts as Chekhov's gun, Chekhov's torch, Chekhov's bungled reach, Chekhov's bombable rocks. I'm surprised the ghost of Anton Chekhov wasn't playable. The way Tears of the Kingdom treats its prologue is like a newborn babe. The moments of free-range exploration, Zelda's companionship, the auditory storytelling, and mixing unfamiliarity with familiarity makes the prologue for Tears of the Kingdom an all-timer. We are in a new era of Zelda, where not only is the tutorial noteworthy, but there is immaculate storytelling before you can even get into exploring mechanics. And that lays the groundwork for a truly remarkable, memorable game. Congratulations, you have made it to the end of the video, which means you get to play Find the Funnelkaek. Leave a comment down below when you find it, but don't tell anybody where it is. Thank you for watching and liking this video. For every like, I will be jumping off a massive cliffside into a shallow pool of water. Take care of yourself, come again real soon, and don't forget that Zelda is always watching.